Hello and welcome everybody, I'm Proper Varen and this is Dev Diary number 37 for Victoria 3. Of course, we are talking today about market expansion. I do think that ultimately, just to bring it back to the themes of the last weeks, we are now back firmly in steady territory, of meaty, juicy Dev Diaries. We are no longer in the drought that has existed beforehand, and I do think that this may spell the end of the hopes for people that think that in May is the release date. I honestly, personally, am slowly moving to August, September for release date, right? And maybe in May, I believe that Victoria was born in May, right? Maybe in May is the announcement of the release date. At the very least, that is something that seems very realistic to me now that we still have so many mechanics ahead of us and we are now coming to the juicier bits yet again. This one was written by Paul Dupre, member of the QA team on Victoria 3. I've been asked to write about market expansion in Victoria 3 and how that can be done through the mechanics of a customs union. Apparently, my credentials speak for themselves indeed. They do. Paul Dupre, little known fact, does have a degree in economics. And you can see it right here. This meme was created by my Discord server. It's a great meme. And it does, of course, tell the truth. I do want to highlight, because Paul keeps highlighting this, that we can trust Lacek and Wiz as well to implement mechanics that are true to the economy, to economics. So let's just say that there is, I think, a bit of expertise in the team itself. Anyway, Paul wrote this dev diary, and customs unions is a very important topic, because customs unions, no matter how you look at it, is something that has to play a big role if you want to make a game that isn't just about map painting, that is about your society and your economy. And with that, you need a solution to expand, to do things without constantly painting the map in your color. To a degree, it would paint it in your color because of the market, right? And we're going to take a look at how that works today. The next week, I can already spoil it for you because it's at the bottom of this dev diary. The next week will be all about trade, and I am excited for that. Trade has been kept a secret for so long. I'm very eager to find out how that actually works. Either way, if you didn't know this, oh my god, you know what, before we do this, they finally did it. And I hope that I can put in an image right here. The Lakotan market is no more. It's no longer an absurd monster. They made it so that markets now no longer run in state regions, instead they run in states, meaning that they can actually be limited by nation. Very happy about that. They finally fixed it. Good stuff. This is why I'm here today, in no small part because I find the customs union one of the more interesting mechanics of Victoria 3 compared to its previous iterations, such as spheres of influence. Yep, that does sound pretty good, because spheres of influence unified basically the political and the economic aspect, and that isn't necessarily the truth. That isn't necessarily something that actually takes place. So, meaning we now have a step in between, and that is very, very important. Now, what exactly is a customs union and how does it relate to market expansion? Before I explain it mechanically, I would like to define the concept both conceptually and historically, so we are all starting with a similar frame of reference. A customs union, and I'm literally pulling the definition from Wikipedia here, folks, is generally understood to be a trade bloc or arrangement among nations. It is most commonly known as a free trade area with a common external tariff or common external tariff policy. The bonds of a customs union are at the very least economical. They exist for the purposes of increasing trade, economic codependence, and mutual benefit that comes from such and can lead to closer political and cultural ties. They do not necessitate a political union, though they are certainly seen through history as the stepping stones towards such. This is really important to understand. Yes, that Zollverein ultimately moved towards the influence that is the Prussian influence, towards the political unification, but it is not a necessity. Okay, political dependency can be developed through these systems, but that doesn't mean that they necessarily have to happen. This is why it's so important for me that the sphere of influence that is political and the customs unions are split in Victoria 3 compared to what we had in Victoria 2. One of the more well-known, at least to the Wiki fanbase, is the Zollverein, which helped further facilitate the unification of Germany, but by no means was the sole deciding factor. The European Union, it can be argued, started off as merely the European coal and steel community. It was very much oriented towards a free trade bloc, so, in this sense, a customs union. Whether or not the North American Free Trade Agreements, or NAFTA, counts as a customs union is up for debate. While trade agreements regularly cover similar topics of tariff and economic codependence, they are usually of smaller scope and scale. This is very important to point out as well. Trade deals and customs unions, there's no universal, general definition of these terms that makes it clear where the line is to be drawn. This is a fluid thing because it is entirely human-made. There is no natural definition of this. And this is why the game and what we will see from the game may sometimes lead to results, to products that are not one-to-one how you would interpret things in real life. He's saying it right now here, right? That basically NAFTA is in a position where it could be counted as a customs union, but it is not so well organized that it couldn't be not counted as just a very extensive trade agreement between three nations. A very interesting topic, of course, but this is very important to point out because a game does need to draw a line somewhere. Somewhere the game needs to say, this is what defines a customs union, this is what defines a trade agreement for purposes of actually having a game mechanic. Otherwise, you can't really have a game mechanic. What defines a union versus an agreement is not always a coherent one-to-one, and before I get into explaining all the counter-arguments of historical note, let's actually talk about the game sum now, shall we? Right, so this is a very interesting thing to understand, that game mechanics do need to sometimes approximate how a relationship works, how things are. They sometimes need to cut off, you know? This could be counted as either, but in the game it will only be counted as one. Now this is itself fine, and you can already see it here as well. Back in the old game, Luxembourg was in the Belgian market. Back in the old game, I believe all of these were in the Hanoverian market, and this was also Hanover, because this is one state region. It no longer works this way. It no longer works this way. Now you will, as a nation, genuinely have influence over your borders. This is huge for me, not just for how vanilla works, but also for how you can envision mods. Ages ago, I made a video on this where I talked about it, where I detailed why I'm so, you know, sad about the way it was solved back in the day with the Lakotan market, because it would mean that even if you had a mod that lets you declare war just for a couple of provinces rather than for an entire state, that state, or those provinces, would still be within the same market. No longer is that the case. You can now, as a mod, variably split any and all provinces, and they will be a part of the proper market that they should be a part. And if I only take the western bank of the Rhine, all of a sudden, I would be in a position where this is in my market, and where this is in the Prussian market. And that is how it should be, quite frankly. So I'm a big fan of this change here. Anyway, let's continue with customs unions. Within the scope of Victoria 3, a customs union is a bilateral agreement between two nations where one nation agrees to subject its national market to another to be absorbed into an economic union. So, a customs union, as per the game, is always top-down. This is a fact. This means that it's a diplomatic action, also known as something another nation has to agree to, as a customs union alone is not something that is normally able to be forced upon another nation. This is important to point out. You can't go and force another nation to just be in your market. This, if you wanted to force them, would have to come with political dependence. And that makes a lot of sense if you think about it. I can't force anybody, if they're politically independent, to join my market. It has to happen because they agree to it. But if I say you're a vassal, and that vassalship comes with the fact that you are part of my market, it is de facto the same thing as having a customs union, except it is more extensive because of politics. This is a good distinction. This is a distinction that, again, didn't really exist to this degree in Victoria 2, and now it fully does. Big fan. Also, of course, it is no longer limited to great powers. You can see right here, these nerds, they all have their own markets. Absolutely gorgeous. A customs union is not limited to only two partners. Other nations may make themselves subject to the senior partner alongside other participant junior nations, but a customs union can only have one senior member in control of the union. You see it right here. Austria is in control of this market, and, for example, Krakow is in it. Prussia has all of these fellas, you know, Württemberg, Baden, Bayern, Sachsen, and so on and so forth in their market, and it is led by Prussia. All the other ones are equal to one another. A big question that I had here as well, and it is somewhat answered in this dev diary, a big question that I had as well is, we are in the same market, how are wars handled between Württemberg and Bayern, for example? Alright, and here we have the actual diplomatic action to get a customs union, a peaceful endeavor of France to assist Sardinia-Piedmont, not at all the beginnings of hegemony in Italy. So this customs union will cost you maintenance because it is a diplomatic pact. Sardinia-Piedmont will be a part of a customs union led by France, creates a customs union subject relation between France and Sardinia-Piedmont, with France as the suzerain. If they accept, French relations towards Sardinia-Piedmont improves by 10. You will also, or rather you can, offer to owe obligations, and they would currently accept this proposal. Right, so basically, you or if you are Sardinia-Piedmont, you do not pay this maintenance cost. This goes to the suzerain, and France would be the suzerain. Your markets would be one. There's an issue here, we're going to highlight that later, but we're going to highlight that when we get to it. Custom unions can be forced through by utilizing obligations by the previously owed country. This will only allow the diplomatic action to take place despite the nation's disposition to say no. It should not be able to supersede any other limitations possible in the game. Thus, it's entirely possible as a larger power to go, you want me to pay off your debt? Sure, I'll do it for a favor. And then force the unsuspecting debtor country into its market. Love that. I really love that. This is really good stuff. Customs unions themselves cannot be forced through war, but they can be forced as a result of other diplomatic entanglements. Certain subject relationships come with the implicit expectations of joining the shared market of their overlord, but they also come with other strings attached. Yeah, we had that indeed in the subject dev diary. What allows a customs union to exist? Let's talk about it. This is dependent upon the trade policy of the participant nations. This means there are trade policies, not many of them, most of them will allow custom unions, but there are trade policies that don't allow it for you. I assume, for example, Japan, right? Isolated, very much unlikely to say we will open our market entirely to any other nation. That is why, in the first place, of course, we had the situation of the treaty ports. Well, it is one of the reasons. Not all domestic laws allow for a nation to partake in a customs union, so there you go, though most will alongside various other trade changes. So this is a big thing, this is a top thing. Trade will be coming with a future dev diary, so I will not be going into detail about that here. Apologies. Very important to point out, again, we don't know how trade fully interacts with this, but what we do know is that you need to change a law to actually join customs unions to begin with. But, assuming that two nations both have trade policies that would allow them to do so, that's all that is needed to... What is all that is needed to form a customs union? Well, economic unions of such are not simple agreements to be engaged in and reneged upon in a whim with anyone in particular. They have some more base level requirements. Let's take a look at it. First of all, you need a neutral or positive relation to conduct this action. Makes perfect sense to me. Two nations that are trying to wipe each other off the map can both be junior partners in the same customs union led by another nation. Just expect all the market disruption that would come with such chaotic developments if it's your frustration to handle as the overseeing power. Basically, what we're talking about here is you need a positive or neutral relationship with the suzerain, but in between you can have wars. I do wonder, I assume that it means that you are locked out from declaring wars against people if you are the suzerain. Makes a lot of sense. I mean, they are part of your market as is, right? But either way, this is an interesting tidbit because it does mean within a customs arrangement, within a customs union, you can still have war. And that was a big topic. A senior member of a customs union must not be a subject of a junior partner or be a junior partner in another customs union. Makes a lot of sense. There's only one senior and then a bunch of junior partners. There's no triple, quadruple, and quintuple layers there. I'm not sure how the more lowly powers might feel about the matter, but the national prestige of this great power will not be subject to any Bavarian market. They must bow to Lübeck or there is no deal. The Lübeck AAR, I see you. If you post a one proper variant, when are you going to do the Lübeck AAR? I'm gonna do it eventually, okay? I've seen the posts, I've seen them. AI considerations such as the requirements of port connections to facilitate market access, comparative GDP, rank, infamy, and other diplomatic considerations are taken into account when accepting or proposing this relationship. Here we have the calculation. Let's take a look at this. Acceptance score is -19, the base value is -50, of course, that is basically I want to be independent. Then we have comparative GDP, you must be larger. Ideological differences, similarities, big fan of this. Ideology playing into this is a big topic. Then we have attitude, +10, relations, infamy, and rank. All of these should play a big role there. I do feel that when I look at this, and we're gonna read this, but I do feel like the same requirements that make it so that, you know, it is very visible to you, that you can tell when somebody can join your customs union, should also play a role when they break off a customs union. Otherwise, it might just feel too abrupt when they just say, sorry, this pact is gone, I'm done. Your entire market would just collapse from today to tomorrow. Maybe we could do something. It could be a diplo play, but then again, they can leave liberally anyway, because like it's an agreement between you two. And diplo plays are based on their being forced, so if they were a vassal and wanted to leave you, they would have to do a diplo play. All I'm really suggesting is that when I look at this text, customs union broken, you are only informed in the aftermath, but you should be informed when there is a risk of it, in my opinion. As well, this relationship is not one and done. It must be maintained, and this is seen both in an influence upkeep by the senior partner per junior member, as they hold the prestige of it being their market and policies which take priority, but a relations upkeep by all partners and the senior member, lest they be booted from the union. This is the thing. There needs to be a counter somewhere. You had this with spheres of influence. It was super annoying, but there needs to be a counter somewhere that lets me know, hey, this nation might leave your customs union soon because they start to dislike you. That sort of stuff. Keeping track of it manually sounds like hell, in particular when you have a union such as this one, where there are 1 million members. I hope you get where I'm coming from here. Either way, though, they will give you a notification at the very least when it does break apart. When a customs union can no longer be maintained due to a variety of reasons, you will get a notification update that you can click for more information. Alright, looks very much like CK3. So, and right here we have this explanation, and this is a difficult one for me because it is as troubled, in my opinion, as the state-region markets were before they were fixed. Let's take a look at this. In the end, what does subjecting themselves to the senior partners market actually mean? For all intents and purposes, it means that the national market of the junior partner no longer exists. They are a part of the senior partners market, so all goods produced, bought, and sold are done so within the confines of that new national market. This fundamentally is not an issue. When you look at this, obviously very easy to see, you're connected, it's all good, right? The issue starts to arise on a fundamental level that is very problematic in gameplay, or should be very problematic, unless I misunderstand something here. That issue, and let me just draw this real quick, this issue arises once you go overseas. This is my beautiful Britain right here on the right, and on the left we have Canada, okay? What you see right here is the closest connection, because that is how it is automatically calculated. It is the closest connection between the port that leads to the market capital, which is London, and the port that leads to everything in Canada, okay? All of these people are in the British market, and to connect them to the British market, you must have a supply network. The issue with this system, as it exists in customs unions, as the market capitals of the nations that join the customs union of Britain stop existing, and instead they just look to the market capital in London. The issue here is, let's say I only have a 30% actual market supply rate, market access, because I don't have enough clippers, right? Making it so that I can no longer actually connect Canada to the British market. What happens? The result of this, from a gameplay point of view, since every single state that exists in Canada doesn't trade with one another at all, it doesn't consider any of the goods produced in your neighboring state, all of these states right here only look at London and say, do I have connection? And if not, every good will have an increased price because the connection is so difficult to maintain, right? The problem of this is that even if I produce wheat right here in Newfoundland, this wheat will not be able to, for example, lower the price of wheat in the neighboring provinces, because all this province actually does is check whether it can reach the market capital. If it cannot reach the market capital, it means that wheat globally is more expensive, and even more expensive for these because they have low market access. This issue is fundamental, because it means that as long as you're overseas, you rely, and it is stated later on as well, you rely on the fact that your suzerain actually supplies the network. If they don't supply it, your states will be unable to trade with one another. We have been talking about this with the devs, like in the Victoria 3 Discord. Great Discord, by the way, I recommend joining. But we've been talking about this for ages now. I remember this, publicly, of course. We've been talking about this for ages now because so many other people have seen this issue as well. And the proposal that fans had was basically to say, okay, we look at this landmass, we see that all of these states connect via this port right here, right? This is a sub-market capital. Meaning that if this sub-market capital fails to properly get a connection to London, it tries to at the very least trade amongst itself. I'm not sure whether this can make sense on a mechanical level, because you rely on price determination by only having one market capital. Having two market capitals by having an upper market capital and a sub-market capital could completely sort of take all of this mechanic apart. I'm not saying this would solve it, but what I am saying is that the way it is right now could easily mean that literally Canada starves despite producing wheat, because the wheat that is in Canada doesn't reach London, and with that, the Canadian provinces that border that wheat-producing province cannot buy wheat. And that's a big topic. I mean, that sucks. That sucks. Listen, if I cut off Canada from Britain, we all know Canada isn't going to say, well, I can't sell it on the British market, well, I'm gonna die. They are going to start more intensely to trade amongst themselves. And that's basically my big complaint. Everything else here in this dev diary about customs unions is pretty good, it's pretty cool. Not too many complaints, but this thing, where the national market disappears as you join somebody else, has a big issue once a market is overseas. So I just wanted to highlight that. You will basically starve yourself despite your neighbor having infinite wheat. Let's continue talking about customs unions, though there is a lot more. Prices can shift towards a new equilibrium as supply and demand internally change to reflect this. Businesses will revisit their input costs and subsequently adjust their labor costs if necessary. You may see some industries boom and others start running on their reserves, hoping for trends to change before they shut their doors entirely, unable to compete with those industrialists in the far-off city. This is a super cool mechanic. I mean, this is just outstanding. The fact that no longer is it a political power play necessarily to be in a customs union, all of a sudden, it means that you are competing with a different market and you may be outcompeted or you may outcompete others. This is a really neat mechanic that really plays into Victoria 3 being a society and econ simulator. Again, the fundamental idea of customs unions is insanely cool. Any trade routes that you might have had as a junior partner may be disrupted. You are not barred from trading outright. As a junior member of the union, that is very important, you can still do trade agreements. But since it's no longer your national market, you will have to engage in a few extra steps to take part in such. This is something we will go into more detail within a future dev diary, so it will be simple statements at the moment. Apologies again. What trade agreements look like? No idea. What trade routes look like? No idea. What we do know is you can still trade as a customs union member. That is pretty good. That is pretty cool. You can bring different stuff onto your market. See, now I wonder, because what it says right here, if you look at this, and we have this example right here, for internal trade, market access will now be calculated based on infrastructure usage in the recipient state and whether it has a connection to the market capital of the senior member. That is the big issue that I have once it's overseas. If you cannot connect the routes by land, then ports will need to be staffed and supplied to provide such connections. If you are the senior partner and you found with the addition of a new member they are struggling to connect to your market capital, you can always consider shifting the center of your market elsewhere to better accommodate all members. Lower Canada has difficulty connecting to the British market due to the shipping requirements for such connections to the market capital back in London. Because infrastructure usage is lower than or equal to infrastructure, base market access is 100% connected to the British market via British shipping lane. Does this mean that Lower Canada can't even counteract this undersupply? Because it is the suzerain's duty to connect you with their very own shipping lanes. Meaning that if I play Canada, I have no way to alter market access. I gotta be honest with you, as I detailed it in my beautiful painting, that's a big issue for me. This is a big issue. In this image, Canada is literally starving because there is no sub-market capital. I'm not sure whether a sub-market capital would work with that system. I have no idea how the system works, how trade works. But I gotta tell you right now, I wish this wasn't the way it is. It does remind me a lot of the state and state-region issue in terms of the impact that it will have and how it will feel. It doesn't feel right, does it? Right? Either way, customs unions per se, of course, you have this internal trade. We know now you can still trade even if you're a junior member with other non-customs union members. Big fan of this. I think that is really cool. I wonder what the specifics are and whether you as a suzerain can block people from trading. There are so many questions that I have, but I am very eager to learn more about it in the next week when they actually do talk about trade, but that's a topic for next week. Domestically, you will still be able to tax and encourage specific goods and services and their consumption, but your ability to embargo or take tariffs on goods coming into the market will depend on your relationship within the customs union. So I assume this means if you're a suzerain, you can do tariffs and you can embargo, and that should mean that you can even stop junior partners from trading because you can embargo the good. Very interesting. I wonder how specific embargoes are. Can they be against other specific markets? Are they on goods? Take tariffs on goods. To embargo? You think the embargo refers to the goods here as well? Who knows? But all of those things are very, very interesting. I would be very eager to learn more about this. I mean, next week we will learn more about this, but all of these mechanics are cool. This is neat. What are the benefits of expanding your market by customs union? Why not just gobble up the territory by forcing someone to be your vassal or taking them under your direct authority? Basically, Paul goes on here to detail how it could be difficult because there's a war involved, of course. There will be war exhaustion. There are costs in the war itself involved, you know, the actual financing of it. Somebody may join against you, so meaning that France might hop in if Britain just says, I want to add Morocco to my market, right? All that stuff can happen and go wrong. Whereas just having a market union has the same effect. You basically, you don't get the taxes and whatnot, but you do get their assets, their, you know, their resources, and that's what you are ultimately there for, right? Meaning you can peacefully and economically paint the world rather than necessarily with force, which comes with a lot of obstacles. All of these factors affecting the state are related to each other. Devastation of a war means not only turmoil for the pops, but the infrastructure is getting damaged, which means goods are not flowing to and from the market efficiently, and standard of living is suffering as a result. So basically the devastation is harming the infrastructure. You can see we're over it, the market access is lower, and turmoil makes it even worse, making it so that basically these people are all very mad. Where are we here? This is an incorporated state. The French market maybe is just Paris? Who knows? The benefits of the customs union are many, but they can also be a double-edged sword. It's not guaranteed to be beneficial, and it's much more in the line of choosing which problems you wish to face, as is much of the way with Victoria 3. Of course. Makes sense. A benefit of a customs union is that it decreases relative transportation cost compared to sticking to trading more manually among markets. You may not need to keep trade routes active, though you may still need to utilize convoys for market connections. Instead of moving a more limited amount of goods between two markets, you have the sum total of the market buy orders and sell orders interacting. Of course, that is why I'm like, basically, since your goods don't actually move there, it just tells the market, I want to sell X resources, right? That is how market access works. It's been in one of the other dev diaries. I am saying that maybe having a sub-market capital wouldn't work because the sub-market capital would have its own sum of buy and sell. I mean, honestly, wouldn't that work? Let's say I want to sell 2 units of wheat in Canada. And I have a sub-market capital in Canada. Sorry that we're thinking about this so much, but this is a topic, it won't let me sleep. I want to sell 2 grain, and I want to buy 1. My market in Canada, therefore... No, it wouldn't work, would it? Because, like, how do you forward the remaining buy and sell orders? You don't forward them anywhere. The price of wheat in Canada just is determined with this calculation. And at best... you could then trade to the actual market capital like you would with a trade agreement in terms of like, it has to be done manually because like, how do you process the buy and sell order if you're already like working with them within Canada and then you have a result that impacts how much your Canadian citizens actually pay for it? I'm confused about this topic. We need trade. I need to see whether trade could deal with this. I don't know. It just doesn't feel right that Canada couldn't solve it internally. But I think the calculations, the buy and sell orders, as we know about them in Victoria 3 as per the previous dev diaries, the buy and sell orders in a market are basically final, right? So I want to buy 1 and you sell 2, meaning in Canada, in the market, the cost for wheat would be very cheap. And that would already be handed out basically to my pops. Now, could I forward this wheat to Britain? Not without screwing a calculation that I've already done, which is the actual property calculation of my pops. I don't know. I don't know. I can just tell you that right now. I'm confused, but I think this is a thing worth thinking about. Let me know whether you have any ideas on how this could be solved. I hope that you like know what I'm talking about when it comes to the calculation. From what we know about how market capitals basically have the buy and sell orders against one another, and then you get an averaged out, or well, the result of it, you get that, and the pops buy at that price. I don't think you can have sub-market capitals without completely throwing that out of the window. Either way, interesting topic. I hope that this is fixed somewhere along the way right now, and as it seemed in the AAR, it does seem that if Canada is cut off, then there will be no internal trading, meaning Canada will just starve. Yeah, because as they say here, it just compares the buy and sell orders. This is a very important point. This may be very welcoming to some, as it means less intensive micromanagement of their national economy and allows them to more natural growth of their industries. This also means the potential degradation, if not dismissal, of your transportation industry that fuels the trade sector of your economy. Super interested in what the hell this means. Super interested in this. The trade sector. Sorry, the transportation industry that fuels the trade sector, which also has implications. Which one is more beneficial to you ultimately depends on what you are trying to do, the size of your nation, and what you can afford. A customs union means both increased goods accessibility and sales accessibility. For example, you can trade with Prussia for your much-needed coal, as Lübeck, as you've seen me do in my previous AAR, but trade is fickle, subject to changing winds of national priority, diplomatic scuffles, and possible embargoes. There will be more embedding yourself into the national economy of another gives you more concrete access to those goods and sales potential, but it also means they have access to your national economy with relatively less barriers. Yeah, you lose control, but you have the potential of maybe just having more in, less scarcity, making it so that you, after all, will be richer. Because we were able to keep the standard of living high, and a Prussia devastated by revolt did not look as appealing, as it's never one single factor that determines these things. We profited further, both monetarily and through migration. Right, here we are making money. The Clippers are actually running a deficit, but I guess, wait, we are running a deficit. Let's read the flavor text. Shipyard profits, which were flagging within Lübeck, see growth and hopefully future profit when being sold on the greater Prussian market. Ah, I see. The market price here is rising as he entered, or as Lübeck entered, I should say, the Prussian market. Yeah, of course. There is a big chance of further success in joining a customs union like that. As Greece, the most recent AAR, we joined the British market with neither a stable standard of living nor competitive advantage in any particular industry to carve our niche. Thus, our prices fell drastically and wages inflated as pops moved elsewhere to greener lands in the far British Empire. Here you have an example of how you shouldn't be doing it, I guess. Greece, after joining the British market, sees its pops migrate to sunnier shores, well, at least more economically thriving shores. Yeah, look at them go. Annual projected migration, minus 7.74k, and what comes in are 6.57k. Actually, that is not what comes in, that is what is born. Right, so you ultimately lose population. Or is this... I don't think growth is birth rate minus migration, right? This is growth on its own, then migration is on its own, and that is why the total population is falling. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, never join a market when you're not prepared to do it. You need to check markets. That is the lesson that I'm drawing from this. The price and standard of living differences across customs unions can have an effect on your and your other partners' populations, and whether or not they choose to migrate. More pops is usually good, but let's make the argument that in some cases, having migration away from your country can also be good in the case of a customs union. Let's take a look at this. Let's say you are a multi-ethnic empire and some of your pops are a little uppity with the ideas of nationalism and their own independence. Thoughts that don't really sit well with your own as they jeopardize the stability of the empire as a whole. You can discriminate, repress, put in police and security forces to try and keep things under control. But that's expensive. It's even harder to maintain when there is the homeland state these pops yearn to join on their borders. What if you brought that neighboring country through agreement or force into your customs union? Sure, your hinterlands may have a population migration to their homeland, but you no longer have an insurrectionary problem to deal with. This is really neat. Would, for example, mean if I was Prussia and I took Poland from Russia, well, Congress Poland, right, made it into a puppet, and then my population that lives in, well, in Prussia, basically in Western Poland, is in a situation where they can now migrate to Congress Poland, enjoy their own state, still be in my market, meaning the workforce doesn't leave, and I no longer have Polish population that is very angry at me existing. That would be pretty neat. This is a very cherry-picked example, of course, but ultimately not all migration seen through a customs union is bad. Even as a small nation, willingly allowing migration of your poorer population within can allow you to refocus your economy, economic policies willing, and potentially attract them back post-reform. Very cool stuff. I'm a big fan of this. And before I digress into every other mechanic, I would like to cover the most important. Why would I allow myself to be subjected as a minor nation within a customs union when it's clearly not advantageous to me scenario? Well, it certainly beats the alternative of getting wiped off the map or subjected further, doesn't it? Basically, that's what is being said here, that sometimes you might want to take this as a compromise solution rather than annexation. Potentially, you could turn this to your advantage and maintain a separate diplomatic policy because of such integrations. In the AAR as Lübeck, we submitted to Prussian customs unions because it was a way to guarantee the AI would not easily turn towards us as a means of expansion, and hopefully, if we tied our economies close enough together, they would not seek to interfere in our affairs, lest we bring the institutions to a halt. This is cool. This is good stuff. This is really neat. You can basically say I'm a quasi-subject, so that you leave me alone, you get access to my resources, and maybe in the future I can basically turn around. Now, that was all when it comes to customs unions. I am a big fan of this change of pace compared to Victoria II's spheres of influence. I have my great reservations when it comes to the topic of overseas customs unions and market access, and I almost do feel like sub-market capitals could maybe do something, but I don't know. You would have to test that. You would have to see that in game. We don't even really know how the buy and sell thing works because we haven't seen the game in action, but I am not satisfied personally with the question of Canada effectively starving, right? That seems very inappropriate. But that is the topic of customs unions. Now we have something else here. With that, I would like to take a moment to address the elephant / economics degree in the room. Never did I think that uttering those words before my introduction would become the meme it is today. But regardless of that, I would like to all correct you to that phrase. Did you know Paul Dupre, the QA lead on Victoria 3, has a degree in economics, is no longer technically correct and has not been for some time, as I've taken over the role of a QA manager on PDS Red. I think PDS Red is CK3 and Victoria 3, right? Isn't it? I think so. I am still heavily involved with Victoria 3, assisting in the onboarding of the new QA lead, giving input and the such. Just now I am making sure that not only does the game have a good level of quality, but that the QA team has what it needs to ensure that for release and onwards. Alright? Honestly, best of luck to Paul Dupre, who is now the QA manager of PDS Red rather than the QA lead for Victoria 3. The team celebrated this news in the best way they knew how. The loading text was updated almost immediately to be more correct, so I could not ask for it to be removed as a bug. Did you know that Paul Dupre, former QA lead of Victoria 3, has a degree in economics? I hope that stays in as a loading tooltip even on release. Next week, is it me again with trade routes and tariffs? Crap, I better start writing. Wish me luck in trying to nail a concise explanation the second time around. Trade routes and tariffs. Huge topic. Next week, I'd like to see whether an overseas market that lacks access may benefit from being treated as a trade route with its own market capital or not. Honestly, I don't know. I'm very eager. I'm gonna ask Paul Dupre once this is out. I'm gonna ask him in the Victoria 3 Discord. So I'm gonna say, Paul, how about that? Would that do something? And then Paul is probably gonna say, don't ask me stupid things. Either way, I will see you later. Alligator, if you got any input, let me know in the comments what you think about my thoughts on Canada and so on. See you later. Alligator.